Don't waste your money. I'm gonna give you a list of 5 vehicles with engines so bad they won't last 5 years. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. Well, let's face it, if you have a car with a bad engine, that's just going to cost you a whole lot of cash. 3 major elements cost the majority of the vehicle's value: the engine, transmission, and the electrics. If you have a major catastrophic failure or chronic issue with any of those areas, it could leave you in the poorhouse or checking your vehicle into the service shop on a regular basis. So that takes us to this first piece of junk right here. And what we have here is, well, if you look at the Hyundai, of course, they've debadged it because they're embarrassed of what it is. But we look along, yeah, people comment that they like the way it drives and it looks sporty. It's a great competitor with the likes of the Honda Civics and the Toyota Corollas. But at the end of the day, it's not a great vehicle. Even though it has the big grille and it has the great little vents and the funny little headlights, yes, it looks somewhat sporty, but it's not a great vehicle. And why it won't last 5 years is simple. And it's not the fact that it has brakes and ABS issues that fault out. It's not even about the fact that this vehicle stalls when you're trying to round a corner and loses power. It's not about that the battery dies on it too prematurely. It's not about the fact that the serpentine belt loosens up too easily, you lose charge, you have squealing and howling under the hood. No, it's about the engine. Some of the worst engines you can expect under the hood here of this vehicle right there is a 2-liter 4-cylinder. And what kind of history? Well, it's no secret. Just browse NHTSA, look all over the net. It doesn't take very long. You do some searches on recalls for late model Hyundais and Kias and you'll find a lot of commentary about bad engines. And that's what you can possibly find here. Some of the engine issues are related to ticking, knocking, clunking. And of course, once you start to hear that, usually it's associated with a check engine light, power loss, surging and hunting, and the vehicle isn't quite getting up to where it's got to go. And sometimes it just means a catastrophic boom. A lot of these engines are known to go off the rails because of faulty oil pumps. And sadly, what you can get is broken piston rings, which is another highly known issue with some of these engines. If the piston rings goes, you're going to get clicking, banging, you get piston slap, you'll get oil consumption, and ultimately damage within the engine. If you have to replace an engine on a vehicle like this that's only worth $6,000 on the used car market because it's 3 years old, then you're pretty much up the creek without a paddle. So at the end of the day, Hyundai Elantra and the 2-liter, forget it, junk. The next car with a host of engine issues, so it likely won't last very long, is this little hot rod right behind me. I know they're very popular for the young drivers, the racers, and all of those that like to tune. What we're looking at here, quite clearly, is little hot number in white is an STI by Subaru. Obviously, it has the flat 4-cylinder engine. It's 2.5 liters in displacement. It's turbocharged and intercooled, of course. There, yeah, they have great lights and flared fenders right there. As you look right here, you've got some flaring. It looks great. Great little accent touches. And of course, this nice pearlescent paint looks great. Of course, there you have this overhang, looks sporty. A set of dual pipes down there as well as down there. Beautiful splitter. And of course, you've got beautiful alloy wheels right there. Amazing looking car. The interior looks boy racer as well, and you can get a manual gearbox with these. So there's clearly lots of reasons people buy these. They have the infamous Subaru all-wheel drive system, ruthlessly excellent, get you through all of the rough conditions of the winter time and sloppiness. Of course, they're very popular in the rally racing world, so that's why people gravitate to these cars. But unfortunately, this 2.5 liter has it's enough of a share of issues to actually choke a horse, and sadly that's going to prevent it from lasting more than 5 years. One of the big issues, of course, has to do with the turbochargers. The turbochargers are a problem here. If they blow, you can have different scenarios coming from bad turbos. They'll make excess noise in there, especially under boost. You'll get excess whining or whistling noise. And the big thing, when you lose seals in your turbos because you actually have oil system in there to lubricate the bearings, you'll actually wind up with smoke coming out of the exhaust tailpipe. So that's one problem. And the turbos are usually $2,000 to $3,000 labor all in. That's going to cost you for sure. The other big issue, though, unfortunately, is in the recirculation of the exhaust gases. And what that usually means is you're stuck with a problem that's contributing to bad ringlands. Well, ringlands are what? Well, your pistons are essentially what compresses the air and makes the power. Well, you have rings to give it that final seal, but it's those rings that actually start to break because the ringlands are where those rings reside. And they start to spread and widen because they start eating and detonating, and then the rings break. So you have excess gap in your ringlands, and then of course you have a catastrophic engine. Boom! Usually means you're gonna spend another $6,000 to $10,000 replacing that engine. Throw a turbo on there, you could get get pretty close to writing this vehicle off, especially if it has some miles on it. And the next vehicle is this one right here. What are we looking at here? Well, it's the big VW, the people's car. And sadly enough, the Tiguan isn't one of the more reliable vehicles that Volkswagen's building today. Lots of issues. You've got great handles, nice detail, engineering around that. High quality fit and finish materials look great. And wonderful parts and pieces like this bed bug infested mattress storage facility on top called a roof rack. And of course we have great LED lights, and we have the front end, that spoiler that looks sharp. Basically an Audi dressed down. Yeah, you have some great wheels like that, and just look at it. It's a very attractive vehicle. You've got some nice lines down the side, and it just looks sharp all the way around. Of course, here we've got beautiful LED taillights, and down here, high gloss black finishing. Clearly, it's a beautiful vehicle, well constructed. It feels nice and sturdy. The interior even feels as good as a BMW or an Audi. But unfortunately, there's a lot of issues with these vehicles. Let's give you the rundown, and sadly, some of the issues really will limit this vehicle, and it won't last 5 years. Almost virtually guaranteed. We'll talk about some of those, but let's look at some of the nickel and dime stuff first. There's a common known issue with some of the lights. Of course, they fog up, steam up, and they just stop working altogether. That is a common issue. Also, the automatic braking system, if you happen to see a fancy little consumer walking across the road, it's supposed to stop, but it may not always do that. There are problems related to the sensing systems on that. As well, there's a problem on the back. Down in there, the rear view camera. When you back up, this guy flips up and it gives you the rear view camera. Well, there's been lots of problems with that, and that doesn't function always either. Infotainment system problems as well, and just a plethora of electrical gremlins that you can actually find in these. A lot of customers or consumers are having to take their vehicle back time and time and time again to try to correct a problem that never gets put away. But there's a lot of other bigger, more significant issues. For example, put your throttle or your foot down and it doesn't completely go. It surges and it pecks. The high pressure fuel pump is a problem. Carbonization's a problem. Injectors is a problem. Throttle body issues in the engine compartment here, which prevents it from idling smoothly. It might hunt and surge or can't find its happy idle spot. And the turbocharger's been known to be a big problem when turbos go. We all know that a turbo might cost you 3 or 4 grand on a German vehicle to change out. That's no joke. Think about that after warranty. But where things get really serious with these vehicles is it's not uncommon for a lot of customers to see excessive oil consumption. And people go in complaining to the dealer and say, hey, I've got 1,000 kilometers is all I'm getting on a quart of oil, and then I'm having to top it up. And the dealers are coming back and saying, well, technically it's within spec. It's no spec. It's ridiculous. An engine that is that loose isn't good. So clearly it's chalked up to bad engine seals, oil control rings on the pistons, or even valve guide seals. And it's eating oil at an alarming rate. It's just a sad state of affairs. One other big problem that you would expect to reduce the life of this vehicle, you have one bad incident. So if all of a sudden you're driving along and you hear this rattle, rattle, clink, clink, think about pulling a metal chain through a metal garbage can. Similar noise to that, or throwing a bunch of nuts and bolts into a metal garbage can. Similar issue. If you're getting that weird clunky or rattling or dragging noise in the engine, it could highly likely, specifically with the Volkswagens like we're looking right here, be related to the timing chains. Yeah, the timing chain tensioners and the guides are plastic, and when they fail, and boom, it slips a cog and you lose your engine. So what you end up having is potentially piston and valve smackdown, and it's smackdown 2023, and your engine's gone. There's too many things going against these vehicles, from expensive parts and engine catastrophic failures and oil consumption. That means guaranteed it won't last 5 years. And the next one on the list is this horrifyingly spaceship looking unit right here, and we're talking about a Dodge Grand Caravan. So first of all, it looks terrible. It looks like it's ready to launch off to space, and that's rightfully so, because they pretty much gave it the send-off, sayonara. And yeah, while these do look like your typical Palm Springs rental vehicle that you find loaded up at the airport, this is in fact just that, throwaway. Easy to chuck people in and out, not worried from the rental car company how people use them and abuse them, because they won't last very long anyhow. These vehicles come with the 3.6 liter Pentastar V6, and of course they have a 6-speed automatic transmission, both of which are quite outdated, the technology outdated, as well as the electronics don't even work all that well in these vehicles. I mean, just look at it. Yeah, you get basic wheels, small brakes, old school headlights. These types of headlights were made back in 2001 on this little Chrysler product here. I've got these big sliding doors here, and old school basic mirrors, and simpleton little handles. Of course, they even have this weird and awkward looking tail end here. Take a look around. Look at this thing. This is weird. I can't make out whether I want to puke, laugh or just cry when I see this. I mean, look at the tail lights here. How about this little rounded off piece? I don't know what Dodge was thinking when they made this piece. Of course, this is the Grand Caravan, as we say, little simple handles. Of course, a little mirror, and naturally the logo from hell. Here as we scroll down, fit and finish issues there. Of course, more is simpleton handles. What's inside too? Feels like you're sitting in a bathhouse. There's a lot of plastic in here for sure, and it looks like my fishing tackle box. These engines were never the epitome of high quality and long lasting. You could pretty much expect oil consumption, but what we can see is oil leaks, coolant leaks, and those are big issues. We also can't help but notice that we have TIPM issues, so the totally integrated power module, which you can see that problem time and time again. And what that is commonly afflicting a lot of Jeep and Dodge products. And that's all your electrics all come into one major brain, one major module. If that module fails, that usually means you're out several $1,000s just to get it retrofitted. That is a sad state of affairs. So the overall quality, reliability is really all up there with the Fiat products. Not great, definitely not built to last, and guaranteed in 5 years you won't see many of these on the road anymore. They'll be gone with the wind. And next we have this lethargic little hot rod parked right behind me here with these fancy little bug eyes. What are we exactly looking at here? Well, it is a Fiat. Yes, it's essentially based on the Italian make. Of course, yeah, it's got the big bug eyes and additional lights there. Similar to the Nissan Juke in that regard. Of course, you have the big wings right there and this fancy little front nose on there. Yeah, they have great wheels like that. Fun little marker lights and great little mirrors. Big sunroof on top. Of course, look at that. Oh, look, we have peeling going on right here. Quality control issues right there. Flipper, and look, of course, we have these cute little rear tail lights. Of course, we have a hitch on there, but I wouldn't dare tow anything with that because you'll blow the gearbox. Of course, down there we have a little carboned up exhaust tip, and we're looking at the Fiat 500L like that. Of course, you have this big barrel back looking deal back here, of course, with that big door that opens up so you can throw a bunch of junk in the trunk. And look at all the grease on the wheels. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. But there's lots of little issues with this, and likely the engine won't last very long as it's a 1.6 liter. Overworked, underpaid. Of course, there's problems when you're turning to the left that makes clunking and banging noises. The infotainment touchscreen system doesn't work sometimes. Of course, inside on the steering wheel housing, because of bad wiring in the steering base, you can actually expect electrical faults throughout, which ultimately we can create a lot of other little problems and gremlins. But one big issue, of course, as I mentioned before, so this has electric problems. It also has transmission issues where it's surgy, hunty. Of course, there's lots of problems with the clutches, and there's a lot of frequency of customers having issues dealing with clutch and transmission issues with these vehicles. Sending them back to the shop, they just don't drive properly and don't get a ton of miles or service factor on a lot of the transmissions. Which blows my mind why anybody would try to put a trailer hitch on something like this. There's also people complaining about exhaust warning lights, low engine oil lights. Even if it was recently changed and you've topped up the oil and verified that the oil was topped up, you still could see low oil pressure and low oil level warning lights. The worst part is you get a turbocharger in there too. That's another point of failure, and not an uncommon failure that is too. And again, any turbo in a modern import vehicle is going to cost you probably $3,000–4,000. And a big problem too is the fact that you need a very special formulation. Because of this multi-air engine configuration, if you don't use the very precise type, quantity, volume, and weight of oil, you will have engine problems. Unfortunately, that is a common issue. Of course, there was a write on some of the software and drivability issues with the engine because of some software updates traced back to actually, unfortunately, a module. A lot of little engine issues. It's sensitive to fluctuations and changing in the right oil. They're minor, they're weak little engines. If you're very gentle with them, they might last a little while, but I guarantee you won't see too many of these on the road in 5 years. And with all of that said, right there, check it out. That's some of the worst vehicles and the transmissions that you'll find in them. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.